Next, we'll take a look at adding some box style into a live code example. So here I've created 5 divs and I've given them each an ID of box 1 through box 5. And here I've set some default style for all of my divs, such as setting the width and height, floating them to the left, and here I've given them a border of 10 pixels groove aqua, as well as adding a bit of margin and padding. First, let's write a selector for box 1. Here I'm going to use the CSS background property. Here we'll set its value using RGBA. To make the color yellow, I can do 255 red, 255 blue, and 0 green. Now for RGBA, we also apply a fourth value that's the alpha or the opacity. So for example, if I do 0.5, it will be 50% transparent. Or if I'd like that to be 100% opaque, I can do 1 for the last number. Now for box number 2, this time for the background property, I would like to set not only a color, but also an image. So here we'll set the RGB value again to yellow. And then if I put a space after the color value, I can use URL in parentheses to point to the location of an image I would like to place inside of the background. So here we'll just use a place filler graphic from the web. So I'm going to open up a new tab and I'm going to go to placekitten.com. And here you can see in order to create a cat of a various size, the only thing you need to do is put in the name of the URL and then the size of the image. So for example, if I do placekitten.com/100 for the width and 100 pixels for the height, it'll come up with this cat here. So we'll go ahead and copy this URL. For the URL, you can either place a relative path to one of your images, or in this case, we're using the full absolute path by putting in http:// and then the domain name, as well as the location of our image. Some other values we can set for the background property are also whether or not this image should repeat. Now by default, all images repeat, meaning that if the background image is smaller than the width and height of your element, it's going to simply tile that image. This can be very ideal if, for example, you're using a repeating pattern. Another value we can set is the positioning. So here I can say top, left, bottom, right, or center. So here you can see that the image of the kitty is in fact centered, but it's also tiling because we have it set to repeat, which is the default. If instead we say no dash repeat, it will not tile and there will only appear a single instance of the image. Some of the other things you can set for repeat are repeat-x, which will repeat the image only horizontally, as well as repeat-y, which will repeat the image vertically. So I'll go ahead and set this back to no repeat. Next, let's move on to box 3. Now for box 3, we're going to use the same background color with no repeat and center specified, but I'd like to change the dimensions of the image here. So here I'll go to placekitten/300 to make it 300 pixels wide by only 90 tall. So in this case, the dimensions of our image are wider and shorter than the dimensions of our element. So if I set the background-size property, we can adjust the size of the image in relationship to the element it's in. For example, if I set background-size to cover, it's going to ensure that the top and bottom dimensions of the image are stretched to cover the entire amount of the element, and here it's actually cropping some of the left and right of the image. Now for box 4, let's change the background size to contain instead. So here we can see the two differences side by side. So when we set background size to contain, it's making sure to contain the entirety of the image within the dimensions of the element, versus cover, where we're cropping the image on the left and right to make sure that it covers all of the available space. For box 5, we'll borrow our code from box 4, and we'll just change the 4 to a 5. And here for the URL of the image itself, we're going to set it to placekitten.com/300/300. We'll also set background size to cover. So here, if we'd like to give some transparency to our cat image, we can use the opacity property. And here we give it a value between 0 and 1, 0 being completely see-through and 1 being completely opaque. So if we'd like to do 50% opacity, we can do 0.5, and that fades our cat out there, 50%. Now additionally, we can set the box-shadow, and this is going to allow us to add a drop shadow onto our element. So the first value here is the horizontal offset. So it's going to offset the shadow 5 pixels to the right of our element. The second value is the vertical offset. So here we're going to offset the shadow 5 pixels below our image. And the third value here is the blur radius. So here we'll set this to 15 pixels. So it's going to soften and feather the edge of the shadow up to 15 pixels out from the edge of the element. And lastly, the fourth value here is the color of our shadow. So I'll just do the hexadecimal color 000, which is black. So there you can see our drop shadow appearing on the edge of our element here. Now additionally, if we'd like to round the edges of our box, we can set the border dash radius property. And here we'll just give it a single value, which will give it a 10 pixel radius on all corners. So you can see it's rounded off 10 pixels of the corners here on each side of our element.